Hey guys, Trip here. After years of wandering between MMOs like some sort of cyber hobo, I finally found the game to fill the WoW-shaped hole in my heart. That's right guys, Final Fantasy XIV is the best theme park MMO I've ever played. And I can't recommend it to anyone. Now, I know what you're thinking, how can that be possible? How can I praise a game this much without recommending it? Well, it's actually pretty simple. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Final Fantasy XIV is a masterpiece. But it has one problem that is so egregious that I honestly can't blame anyone for quitting before they hit level 40. If you're on the lookout for a new MMO and Final Fantasy XIV has caught your eye, you might want to watch this video first. But I don't want this episode to be all about negativity, and I don't want you guys to think that I'm just trying to bash this game. When I start tearing this game apart, I want you guys to know that it comes from a place of love. So I'm going to start by talking about all the things I love about Final Fantasy XIV. So let's take a look. For all you longtime listeners, you know exactly what we have to start with here: the world building. I am a sucker for good world building. Hell, I play games as much for the atmosphere, lore, and aesthetic as I do for the gameplay. Final Fantasy XIV is near perfect when it comes to my taste in world building. I'm not saying it's the second coming of Morrowind or anything, but what it does well, it does really well, and in a way that I just love. Now there's a lot of things I could bring up here, and if you guys want, I may do a whole video on the lore of this game. But for now, I just want to focus on one aspect: the genre. It's no secret, guys, I'm a sucker for science fantasy. It's probably my favorite genre of fiction. Well, Final Fantasy XIV is the ultimate science fantasy MMO. Sure, there's plenty of games that dabble in some steampunk here or some space magic there, but Final Fantasy XIV is built from the ground up on this concept. Everything from the story to the gameplay to the quests to the environments, hell, even the UI is drenched in this science fantasy aesthetic. Not only that, but it features Magitech, probably my favorite science fantasy trope. This isn't a world where technology and magic represent opposing forces and never the two shall meet. No, this is a world where the line between magic and technology is blurred to the point of irrelevance. All the magic in the game is glossy, ethereal, almost sci-fi looking, with a lot of force fields and energy beams. You can ride a tank that shoots spells out of a cannon. Hell, I have a sword that is also a gun that shoots magic. And if you think that sounds absurd, it is, but it's all consistent within its own world, and that's the beauty of it. This isn't just silly nonsense thrown together with no rhyme or reason. This is a well thought out science fantasy universe. You know what? I'm just gonna show you guys a scene that I think encapsulates what I'm getting at here. Don't worry, this isn't a spoiler. You'll have no idea what's going on until you get to this exact moment. But it just goes to show the kind of world you're getting into when you log into Final Fantasy XIV. And this also brings me to my next topic of praise: the sheer fucking spectacle of this game. I'm not usually one for big set pieces, you know, give me Morrowind over Skyrim, but I have no problem with big, flashy, over-the-top scenes when they feel earned. Final Fantasy XIV is full of moments like what you're seeing on the screen right here, but each of them is the product of hard work and build-up. When the game is at its best, it's paced brilliantly. They're always hinting at some distant goal, some really cool thing you know you're gonna see, do, or experience in some way, but you need to work your way there. So by the time you get to these moments, they feel like the product of your handiwork. They feel like something you've earned. Let's talk about the gameplay. It's pretty damn great. Now, you guys know this isn't my area of expertise. I'm not the kind of person who min-maxes. I'm not diving deep into the mechanics to try to figure out the optimal ways to play the game. All I can tell you is my experience playing Final Fantasy XIV and whether or not you'll enjoy this kind of gameplay. So, how do you describe Final Fantasy XIV's combat? In general, if you're familiar with WoW, you'll be familiar with this game. Combat is based around rotations, procs, and cooldowns. Each class has its own flow to it, and a unique mechanic that sets it apart. The game rewards both tactical discipline and adaptability. The game also employs what I can only describe as Japanese bullet hell. Enemies have a lot of cleave and AoE attacks, and they often telegraph their most powerful moves. Now, this may not sound like a big deal, but as the game goes on, bosses will start to combine these attacks and use them more often. At times, the entire battlefield will be covered in danger zones, and you need to react with both speed and precision without sacrificing your role in the party. You can never get too comfortable in combat. You can't just zone out at higher levels. You need to buck and weave through fireballs and energy beams. You're essentially juggling two mindsets. One is focused on optimizing your rotation and managing cooldowns, and the other is constantly watching the battlefield for hazards. Now, the combat really shines in the boss fights. Each encounter is a microcosm of everything I've talked about so far. The atmosphere is rich, the music is incredible, the mechanics of the later bosses really keep you on your toes, and each fight feels like an over-the-top spectacle. Now, if there's one thing I love, it's genre breaking. The last thing I want to do in a game is repeat the same tasks in the same ways over and over again. Well, boss fights in FF14 definitely know how to break the mold. The boss fights often employ some unique mechanic, say a gadget you found that drains the boss's energy, or a quick time event to break free from your opponent's trap. Hell, one boss sent my party hurtling into the stratosphere, and we needed to dodge his attacks as we were free falling back to the ground. Sure, some people may hate these gimmick fights, but they add flavor to the game, and that's what I care about. Now, I'll admit, at the end of the day, Final Fantasy XIV is a traditional theme park tab target MMO, but it innovates so much within that space. And these boss fights are a perfect example of this game's philosophy. It does something traditional and twists it a bit. So the combat is this weird mix of traditional tactical gameplay, action combat, with some minigames sprinkled in for variety. To quote my arch nemesis, it just works. But combat is just one aspect of MMO gameplay. Let's talk about the social side of things. There are certain MMOs like SUTOR and ESO where you can basically play them as single-player games without missing too much. Sometimes that's the kind of experience I'm looking for, but that is not the case in Final Fantasy XIV. This game is an MMO first, and a huge portion of the game revolves around group play. In fact, every dungeon in the game directly ties into the story. Fortunately, getting a group together is as easy as pressing a button, and veteran players often come back to early dungeons, meaning you'll never get lost or be unsure of what to do or how to tackle certain boss fights. One thing I will say about the social side of the game is that when it comes to just general communication and talking, just basic community stuff you see in other games, people tend to just stick to their own guild in a lot of ways. You're not going to see a lot of people talking in general chat, for example, and you know, that can be a double-edged sword. If you're not in a guild or your guild just happens to be kind of quiet, Final Fantasy XIV could be a very quiet experience for you. And for an extrovert like me, that's a definite minus. But hey, at least you won't have to deal with any kind of Baron's chat. But we can't talk about Final Fantasy without talking about the music. Now, I gotta say, at first I wasn't that impressed by the music in this game. Sure, it's great music, but I've always been more partial to the sweeping soundscapes of Jeremy Soule or the various Warcraft composers. FF14, on the other hand, features a lot of laid-back, casual tracks, especially when you're exploring the wilderness or walking through a city. They're great tracks, but they don't really evoke emotion in me like the Ashenvale theme from WoW or Wings of Kinnereth from Oblivion. But the exploration tracks are just a small fraction of what's at play here. Whether it's dungeon themes, boss themes, or cutscene music, Final Fantasy XIV is full of incredible tracks. And because of that science fantasy theme, they're able to play around with a lot more genres than you're used to in your average MMO. This is a world where playing a heavy metal song for a boss battle makes sense. And like so many things in FF14, as the game goes on, the music gets better. Some of these tracks are just mind-blowing. They add so much emotional weight to the scenes, and I know for a fact that a few of them are gonna stay with me for years. In fact, some of my new favorite songs are in this game. I'm playing one of them right now. There's one song in particular that is so fucking hype that I can't get it out of my head. I'll play it once we start criticizing the game. It'll help maintain my sanity. But Final Fantasy XIV doesn't just stop at great music. Put simply, this game has some of the best sound design I've ever heard in an MMO. Every zone is a tapestry of high-quality sound. In the wilds, you'll hear birds chirping, the crashing of a distant waterfall, and the eerie chimes of magical crystals. Cities feel bustling and full of life. Whenever a large group of players gather in one place, you'll begin to hear people talking, as though there are dozens of casual conversations going on around you. This can utterly transform the vibe of taverns and city streets, and it makes the realm of Eorzea feel alive. This may not sound like a big deal, but so many MMOs neglect the sound design. I can't tell you the amount of games that feel borderline silent the moment you turn off the music. Worse yet, many of them feature low-quality, repetitive sound clips that just get boring after a while. When it comes to immersion, what you hear can be just as important as what you see. Good sound is the sort of thing you don't know you want until you have it, and once you have it, you simply can't go back. Now, I could talk all day about what's good about the game, but it's time to address the elephant in the room. Quite simply, the first 100 or so hours of Final Fantasy XIV is garbage. I'm talking about the entire base game here, 50 levels worth of content, plus about 2 years worth of endgame material. Do you remember those Jawbreakers you got at Six Flags as a kid? Those things could take weeks to finish. Imagine if the core of that Jawbreaker is filled with diamonds. Now imagine the outer layers of that Jawbreaker are filled with poison ivy, dog shit, razor blades, and the baby teeth of children who came before you. Sure, it's worth getting the diamonds, but that doesn't make getting there any easier. That's roughly what it's like to play Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I'm going to get into some examples, and this is the part where the video becomes very subjective. The base game of Final Fantasy XIV was designed to infuriate me specifically. It's my personal hell. If you're like me, it might be your personal hell. If you're not, then you might love it. Either way, the best I can do is explain my experience, and hopefully you find some value in that. Also, it's been weeks since I've done these quests, so I might be a bit hazy on the details, but trust me, the rage remains. Lastly, I want to make it clear that everything I'm about to say only applies to the base game. The moment you get to the first expansion, FF14 becomes incredible. So with those huge disclaimers out of the way, let's get started. To summarize, the game starts okay, a little slow, but nothing out of the ordinary for what I'd expect of a Final Fantasy game. But things just go downhill from there. I have never played a game with a story as bad as this one that also insists on shoving that story down your throat. With maybe 3 exceptions, no one has any personality in this game. The dialogue is exactly what your high school teacher warned you against. I'm talking purple prose out the ass, paragraphs upon paragraphs of pretentious pseudo-intellectual bullshit that could be condensed down to a single sentence. You know you fucked up writing dialogue when it sounds awkward to say out loud. No one talks like a human being in this game, and this is coming from someone who sounds like a pubescent twink whose voice won't stop breaking. Now I know what you're thinking. Why not just skip the dialogue? Well, that's where it gets insidious. As boring, unimaginative, and trite as this story is, if you don't read every single line, you will have no idea what's going on when the game actually gets good. So much of the first expansion relies on you knowing who these characters are, seeing them grow and evolve into actual people, and understanding the lore established in the base game. Sure, there's probably tons of filler that you could skip, but while you're playing the game, you have no idea what's going to come back and what isn't. And this is a game that loves to make seemingly unimportant things come back in a big way. It's like some sort of hazing ritual. If you want to enjoy this game to the fullest, you're going to have to suffer. There's no way around it. And it doesn't stop at bad writing. Final Fantasy XIV's base game has some of the worst quest design I have ever seen. Now, I was originally going to take a deep dive into the quest design in a video I would have called Final Fantasy XIV is my personal hell. In that video, I would have described my experience with the base game from start to finish to really illustrate why I think it's so bad, and to assure you guys that I'm not exaggerating here. I might still make that video if you guys want me to, but I really don't want this video to be any more negative than it already is, so I'll keep it short. To put it simply, the quests in Final Fantasy XIV are insulting, sometimes literally. The quest givers in this game are despicable. There are times when the world is in urgent and immediate danger, and people will refuse to help you until you perform days' worth of menial chores, mocking you along the way. Now, you're probably thinking that MMOs do this all the time, but it's a matter of both frequency and magnitude here. It's one thing to ask a player to collect 20 bear asses. It's another thing to tell them that if they don't, thousands of people will die. Let me set the scene for you. An entire city is at stake. A giant monster is threatening everyone on this island and could attack at any moment. This quest giver has vital information on how to stop this threat. And he won't help you until you make him a feast. This game has an entire story arc with multiple quest lines and dungeons dedicated to preparing a feast. You have to travel across the entire game world, doing chores for his rude friends before they'll give you the necessary ingredients. After spending about 2 days on this story arc, you find out that this was all a test, to see if you were good enough to beat this monster. As for the vital information this quest giver had, do they tell you some big, interesting secret about the monster? Nah, they just tell you how to find it. But they do have one piece of useful advice. Believe in yourself. When you're not literally shoveling shit or spraying perfume on chocobos, the entire base game is like this. And I'm barely scratching the fucking surface here. There's another story arc with multiple quest lines and boss fights dedicated to finding a crystal. Now, that would be fine, except your character is too stupid to ask what kind of crystal he needs. Yet again, you travel the entire game world, doing numerous chores for rude NPCs, several of whom literally insult your intelligence. After all that hard work, you finally get that crystal. Except, wait, you wanted to do what with that crystal? You're so stupid. If you want to do that, you obviously need another kind of crystal. That thing is basically garbage. Go get another one. So after doing more chores for a new set of rude NPCs, you finally track down the crystal you need. You travel to a haunted island and destroy an evil sea monster, all for that precious crystal. But then, oh, you did it again! You got the wrong crystal! You're so stupid! Why didn't you just ask which crystal you needed? Oh wow, you went through all that trouble for nothing! Go get another one. I call this the Wild Crystal Chase arc, and I don't like it. And I want to stress this. These are not side quests. This is the main storyline. Eventually, it gets to the point where even the writers start pointing out how stupid the quests are. I'm not kidding. Toward the end of the base game, NPCs will start legitimately asking, "Why are you being made to do this? This sounds stupid." These are near fourth wall breaks, and they almost feel like cries for help from the writing team. It's good to know I'm not suffering alone. Now, of course, there are worse games than this on the market. Just look at Steam and you'll get hundreds of examples in a few minutes. But none of those games have the reputation of Final Fantasy to live up to. None of them have stellar reviews behind them, or hordes of fans promising you every step of the way that it gets better. I'm not invested in a shitty little game I found on Steam. I don't feel compelled to keep on playing so I can experience the good part. Final Fantasy XIV is uniquely bad in that it's actually really good, and that makes every mind-numbing second you spend in the base game even more painful. You know, in retrospect, it makes sense that the first expansion is called Heavensward, because you have to work your way through hell to get there. This is a fucking tragedy. One of the best MMOs of the past decade is buried beneath this cesspit of nonsense. So how am I supposed to recommend a game that takes this much effort to enjoy? Sure, I went through it, but I'm out of my fucking mind. It took me 2 to 3 weeks of constant playing, and I honestly can't say I enjoyed any of it. And that's with a giant experience boost and doing virtually zero side quests. Your mileage will vary. I told myself I wasn't gonna do this. I really did. But like I said at the beginning of this video, none of this venom I'm spewing comes from a place of hatred. I've said this in previous videos. I'm the kind of friend who will tell you when you have spinach in your teeth. Well, Final Fantasy XIV is basically Popeye. He's practically OD'd on the stuff, but I still love his chick and... Wait, is that how it works? Anyway, I should probably close out this video. So why did I decide to make this? Well, contrary to what you might think, I didn't make this video to warn people away from the game. Rather, I want this video to serve as an honest depiction of the game, both good and bad. This is a game that front-loads its bullshit, and if all you see is that Metacritic score, you might just assume the game isn't for you and move on. My biggest fear is that people will try this game, get frustrated, and quit, never knowing how amazing it can be. I mean, that's what almost happened to me. When I first started, I had no idea what this game was going to be like. When I started getting frustrated, I honestly thought I was just crazy. As it got worse, I decided the game wasn't for me and was honestly about to quit. If it wasn't for the constant support, encouragement, and empathy of this game's community, I wouldn't have made it. Turns out I wasn't crazy. Turns out everyone kind of knows the base game is garbage. It's almost like surviving it is this rite of passage, this thing everyone hates, but they suffer through it because it's worth the reward. So that's the point of this video. I want to do for you guys what the community did for me. I want to be your Sherpa through the land of Eorzea. Here's the bottom line. I can't officially recommend a game to you guys that takes this much work to enjoy. I won't recommend a game that requires you to buy an expansion before you start having fun. But if you made it through this video and you're still intrigued by this game, here's some tips. Set your expectations accordingly. Take breaks. Keep one of your favorite games nearby and switch to it when you get frustrated. You will. Turn on some Netflix reruns or your favorite YouTube channel and let it run in the background. Don't do what I did and try to power your way through in one go, especially if the game pisses you off as much as it did me. Join Novice Chat. It's a channel for new players and veterans alike, and it's one of the most active channels in the game. This way, you'll always have someone to talk to during the more boring quests. Now, if this doesn't sound worth it to you, then I can't disagree. That's why I can't recommend it. But who knows, maybe you start the game and find out none of this shit bothers you nearly as much as it did me. Despite everything I've said in this video, I think we need more games like FF14, and I'm overjoyed at how popular it's becoming. Since the new expansion, the game is overcrowded by former WoW players who've heard nothing but praise for the game. But I'm already seeing people quit before they experience how brilliant the game really is. So if you're playing this game and you see a newbie having trouble, give them a helping hand. Share these tips with them. If they still want to quit, that's cool too, but make sure they know how great this game becomes. Final Fantasy XIV deserves a better first impression. But until they fix the problems in the base game, the best we can do is help people through it. Hopefully the devs realize their mistakes, and hopefully they come back to the base game and give it the revamp it deserves. But hey, that's just my opinion. Hey guys, Trip here. If you liked that video, why not watch some more? Hit that like button and make sure to share this video on Reddit and social media. Have you ever wanted to wear my face like a grizzly pelt? Well, check out Rage On. There you'll find all sorts of Psycho Trip merchandise to satisfy your grim needs. If you want more Psycho Trip, check out my Patreon. There you'll find all of my videos, as well as articles I've written for Comicsverse. If you like what you see, think about donating $1 or $2. It's a long story, but I'm naked on a beach in Venezuela fighting rabid dogs. I need help getting home. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.